Whenever you're ready.
This is June 7th, 2013, in Liberty Center, Ohio. My name is Ralph Jr. Young Creager, and I was born on January the 10th, 1924, at the home of my grandparents, Melvin Clifford Young and Bertha Steambarge Young. My father had died 3 months before I was born with a bout of typhoid fever. So my mother moved back to the Young household since she was all alone. My mother told me that it was a rainy day in January on a Thursday when I was born. The house that I was born in still stands. It is at the intersection of Road 6C and S in Washington Township, Henry County, Ohio. I'm surprised the house is still standing, because as a child I remember the house wasn't in the best condition then, some 89 years ago. I have had a happy life. I was blessed with a very compassionate stepfather who took good care of my mother and I. I was born in January of 24, and they were married in August of 1925. My grandmother didn't want to change my name from Young, so I wasn't adopted until just before I went to college, and I was 17 years old in August of 1941. Nobody made fun of me. The fact that my mother and father had a different name didn't make any difference to anyone. The kids in school accepted me as Junior Young. When I was born, and after the doctor had completed taking care of my mother and I, he and my grandmother were sitting at the kitchen table having a cup of coffee, and he was filling out the birth certificate. He asked my grandmother, "What are you going to name that kid?" And she said, "Ralph Jr., meaning to name me after my father, whose name was Ralph Earl Young. But the doctor wrote down on my birth certificate that my name was Ralph Jr. Young. Not wanting to call me Ralph since my father had just recently died, they always called me Junior. But I'm not a junior. Junior is my middle name, and I've always been pretty proud of that because of the way that I obtained it. For the first year after my stepfather, Fred Creager, and my mother were married, we lived in Napoleon on Monroe Street in an apartment building that had 4 apartments in it, and it too still stands and is used as a residence. The following year, we moved back to Liberty Center, and we lived on Damascus Street, over by the schoolhouse. And we lived there during the time when my brother, Bruce Frederick Creager, was born. He was born September 1927. And we lived there until I was, is that it?
Nope, keep going.
We lived there until I was in the second grade, 7 years old. And we moved to a house on Maple Street, close to where the Wabash Railroad went across the street. My parents lived there until 1954, when they moved to another house also on Maple Street. I lived there with them in the big house till I was 17 years old and went away to college. And after college followed the Army. So I was actually absent from Liberty Center for about 5 years. And during that time, I had finished college, gone in the Army, got married, served my time, and came back home to Liberty Center. How we got when I got home, and my brother got home shortly after, my dad asked us if we would stay and work with him on the road construction company for 1 year. We didn't have a job or know what we were going to do, so that looked like a good opportunity. So we said yes, we would stay with him for 1 year. At the end of that year, on New Year's Day, he called us up and asked us to come over to the house, that he had something he wanted to tell us. And when we got there, he said, "Well, you fellows have fulfilled your obligation of 1 year. And I don't know what you're going to do now, but I have a proposition for you. If you stay on and work with the company, we will consider you as full partners." That sounded like a good deal, because right away we became the owner of 1/3 of the construction company. And we stayed, and we stayed, and we stayed. Finally, in 1971, my brother decided we had stayed long enough, and we sold the company to S.C. Johnson Company, with the stipulation that we would stay and run the company for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, my brother decided he wanted to do something different, but I went to work for Maumee Stone Company, which was a division of S.C. Johnson Company. And I stayed for 17 years until I was 64 years old when I retired, which now has been almost 25 years ago, and that hardly seems possible. I married a girl that I met in college. Her name was Margaret Jean Lance. We had our first date on June 10th, 1944, and I went into the Army on September 20th, 1944. A lot of correspondence in letters went back and forth between us, and I returned home on June 19th, 1945. On June 23rd, 1945, we were married, and 2 days later took off on our honeymoon to Texas to be in the Army. Our marriage lasted 55 years when Jeannie died of the results of a stroke. 55 good years. We had 3 children, Cheryl Lynn, Mary Beth, and Julie Amelia, who are now strung out all over the country. Cheryl lives in Bradenton, Florida. Mary Beth lives in Chicago, and Julie lives in Waco, Texas. So our family is pretty well strung out. I have 5 grandchildren. The oldest one is, gotta stop and think, is an adopted son of Cheryl's, who was born in 1976. Mary Beth had 3 children. Eric, born in 1980. Aaron, born in 1982. And Tate, born in 1988. Julie has 1 child, a boy, who was born the 18th of May, 1993, and at the present time is a student at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. My grandson Tate is engineering this recording, and he has some questions he would like to ask me, so I will end my particular dialogue of this, I guess it's a monologue of this story, and we'll start with Tate's questions.
Okay. Junior, I guess going back to your childhood, where did you attend church at, or did you attend church?
Yes, I attended church at St. John's Reformed Church of Christ, and I was baptized there in 1928.
Okay. Trips to Florida, I've heard you mention a lot of the time. You spent your 4th birthday, was it?
No. He has asked me about my many trips to Florida. The first one was December 1928, and I was 4 years old. My father had rented a cottage in Hollywood, Florida. So when January 10th came along, I had my 5th birthday in Florida. The next time I went to Florida, we left on Christmas Day, 1932. And there again, being in Florida on January 10th, I had my 9th birthday in East Palatka, Florida, on the St. Johns River, up north in Florida. The St. Johns River, where we lived on an orange grove, a little way out from the small community, was 2 miles wide, and the river boats still went up and down the river from as far as they could go west out to Jacksonville, Florida. The next time I was in Florida was 1937. I was a freshman in high school, and we went down just for a month over Christmas vacation. And the next time in 1938. The next time came in 1945. and Gene and I were stationed in Baltimore, Maryland, and we went down for a couple weeks on my vacation time. After that, there were numerous trips, just short ones, maybe 3 weeks or so, to visit Mom and Dad, who lived in Florida for 6 months of every year. My mother continued to live in Florida 6 months until she was about 93 years old, and then she wasn't able to go anymore. So that's my journeys to Florida.
On one of your trips to Florida, I think I hear you mention one time on the way back up you stopped in Washington, D.C., and you saw some president's inauguration, maybe?
When it came time to come home in 1929, my dad decided that he wanted to go through Washington, D.C. And when we got to Washington, D.C., and I don't know if he knew about it before that or not, but Herbert Hoover was being inaugurated. And even though I was only 5 years old, I remember the inauguration parade, because the Army cavalry, who really had horses in those days, was parading down the street, and there were about 12 abreast, horses and riders coming down the street, and I can remember that very plainly. One other thing I remember about it was that it rained.
Did you make any other vacation trips to anywhere other than Florida, or is that pretty much it?
Well, I think it was 1934. My mother, my brother and I, Grandma and Grandpa Creager, and one of the grandchildren named Julia Johnson drove a 1931 Willys Overland Whippet to Shamrock, Saskatchewan, Canada, some 1,750 miles. The roads weren't even all paved. Some of them were just two trails with grass in between the wheels. And how my mother ever survived to get two old 75 or 76-year-old people, two young kids and a 16-year-old girl, all the way out there and back, is still amazing. But other vacations, we took a few while I was in high school. On the last weekend in October, the school was out on Friday, and they had a teachers' meeting. So we would take little side trips, and I remember going once to Niagara Falls, and we stayed overnight in a town called Hamburg, New York. And you noticed when you walked into a building that the lights would flicker. And the reason they flickered was that they were drawing power from Niagara Falls, and the generators were running on a 25 per second generation, where nowadays we have 60 cycle current and we don't notice the flickering of the generators. But at 25 cycles per second, you definitely could tell that the light was coming and going.
Okay, so you were born in 1924. What was it like growing up in Liberty Center during the 20s and 30s? What did you do for entertainment? You know, do you have any specific friends you remember? Playmates, you know?
Yes, I had some very good friends. One was named Stephen Creager. One was named Billy Lee Sharp. One was named Kenneth Starkey. And another one named Robert Romaker. And as far as what we did, we just played. We had a passion for building things. If we could talk the grocery man out of an orange case, we would build a car out of it, or a sled, or something else. Another thing we did, we dug holes in the ground, covered them with planks and dirt, and made a cave to get down into.
Okay. Do you remember elementary school very well? First grade teacher, second grade teacher, best friends, maybe?
I remember going to school very plainly. And my first grade teacher's name was Fern Haver, and she came from Sherwood, Ohio. And I think that Fern Haver was the first love of my life because she treated us so well. My second grade teacher was a lady named Mrs. Stewart, whose husband was the agriculture teacher in school. My third grade teacher was a young girl named Gertrude Murdoch. She wasn't married yet. Later on, she married Charles Crawford. My fourth grade teacher was Miss Wright, Phyllis Wright. And my fifth grade teacher was my uncle by marriage, Brian Jennings. He had married Mildred Young, who was my father's sister. In the sixth grade, I had a very good teacher. His name was Frank Overmeyer, and he was all business. At recess, he would be out and play baseball or football or whatever with everybody. But when you got back into the classroom, it was all business again. And one thing I remember him teaching us, in our arithmetic class, they taught us how to write a check. And I remember him telling us that if we wrote a check for less than $10 on the description line, you should put only $4.59. And every time I write a check of under $10, I still remember that today.
Okay. I remember you telling a story about one time you were farming or something, and some kind of piece of equipment fell on your foot,
Yeah.
and it busted it up good or something.
I was about probably 10 years old, and my grandparents still lived in the house I was born, and they farmed that farm and an adjacent farm. Well, like every little one, I was teasing my grandfather to let me drive the horses, and he was using a disc that was about 6 feet wide, and it took a team of three horses to pull it. So he let me drive on a very hot July day. The ground that he was using the disc on to get it ready to plant was along the edge of a woods where there had been some trees cut down. And I went over a root which the spring seat threw me off under the disc. And my leg went between 2 of the disc, and evidently I had hollered whoa to the horses, and being a hot day, they were ready to stop. But in the process, my right foot got a very severe cut right on top of it. And my grandpa, who was probably, in his 50s, came over to the disc, picked it up with one hand, and pulled me out with the other. And he swore that any other time he wouldn't have been able to have picked up the disc. But he was scared enough that he got me out. I was laid up most of the summer, and I got an infection in it. I have a big scar on the top of my right foot, remembering that incident.
How old were you when you were aware that your father had died?
What?
How old were you when you were aware that your father had passed away?
I think I always knew that my father had passed away. And one reason was we had a big picture about a 1.5 feet by 2 feet wide that hung on the wall in our living room. And I was small enough that my stepfather would pick me up and hold me up to that picture and tell me, "That's your dad." So evidently I knew early on
Okay.
that my father had died.
Okay. Your grandparents, the Youngs, what were they like?
My grandparents were poor people, but you didn't know they were poor. Their clothes were clean. They worked hard. And evidently they married very young, because my grandmother was born in 1880, and I think she had her first child about maybe 1899. So they were married young. My father was the second child, and he was born in 1901. So she would have only been 21 when her second child was. When my first uncle, Melvin, the older one, and my dad were born, they lived in Toledo, over on the east side. And my grandfather was the conductor on the streetcar line. And I don't know what happened, what the circumstances were, but they wound back up in Liberty Center as farmers. Sharecroppers, as it were. And they never owned a house. I don't think they even lived in a house that had electricity until the last house they lived in. And the reason it had electricity, while other houses in the country didn't have, that years ago, some airline had erected a beacon on this farm by the barn. One of those that went round and round and round at night with a white beam. And since electricity was piped out from town, it became obvious that the house would be wired too. But they were good people. God-fearing, church-going, and my grandfather was a Mason. But they never had any money other than the very meager amount to live on. But they worked hard.
Holidays, any traditions you remember on Christmas? Did you dress up for Halloween, 4th of July, etc.?
Yes, the one that I remember about the earliest of my memories of a holiday was Memorial Day. The ladies of the American Legion Auxiliary would get all the little kids they could get in the parade on Memorial Day. And we all got a little flag to carry, and we all got a flower to carry. And we marched behind, we were the last in the line of the procession, all the way down to the cemetery and up to a gazebo that was there at the time. And we marched around it and we laid our little flower down on the ground. And that was Memorial Day. And I remember going afterwards, the ceremony at the cemetery, they would go to the high school auditorium for some kind of a celebration. And one thing that I remember yet, even when I was little, my friend Frank Cook's mother had been a school teacher, and she had a very distinctive voice. And every year she would recite, "In Flanders fields the poppies grow, between the crosses, row on row." And I never forget that. Christmas was always a good time at our house and everybody's house. Presents weren't a galore. And I remember one thing that we always got in our stocking was an orange. An orange was a big treat, you know. But we had good food. My mother was a good cook. Easter, while we went to church and we dressed up as we should, but we never made a big deal of that because my mother was not, she was a good Christian woman, but she was not strong for going to church. And of course, Halloween. I remember we only got to go down our street, almost to where Mom could keep an eye on us, you know. And there were a couple older ladies there, one that lived next to us named Minerva Conley, who had been Levi King's daughter. But when you went to Mrs. Conley's house, you had to come in, take off your mask and coat if you wanted, and sit down and talk. She always rewarded us with a nice treat. Usually, as I remember, homemade cookies or maybe a popcorn ball. But you had to go into those houses and sit down and talk to the people. And I can remember that from when I was real little. Well, it would have been when I was about 7 or 8 because we hadn't moved up to that house till I was 7. Thanksgiving, always had a turkey. I remember one Thanksgiving, my family, who were good friends of another family named Jack Bicken, who lived in Hamler, she invited us down for Thanksgiving dinner. And as a special treat, she cooked a goose instead of a turkey. But I have to this day say, I don't really like goose.
Well, high school, extracurricular activities, teachers, coaches, friends.
High school was a good time for me. I started in 1937. I was 13 years old. During that summer, my dad had a paving job at Xenia, Ohio. And he had purchased a 1936 house trailer. It was 16 feet long. 16 feet long. And we took it down there and parked it in a farmer's yard. And we lived there for 7 or 8 weeks in the summer. And I remember I had to get ready to come home. I had to come home to start high school. My high school teachers were great. Herman Romaker was a dedicated superintendent, and Walter Reddick was the principal. The coach, who coached about every sport that we had, basketball, football, track, and everything, was a man named Minor Kirshner, who was a great psychologist if he wasn't a good football coach, because he knew when to pat you on the back, and he also knew when to kick you in the rear. But we had a pretty good team. In fact, in the first 2 years that I was playing football, I wasn't much of an asset to the team. I only weighed like 140 pounds. But anyway, in 1937 and 1938, Liberty Center High School was undefeated. The next year, when I was a junior, we had gone 19 games, I think it was, without being beat. And we went over to Delta. And Delta made such a shambles of our efforts that it thought we never played football before. We got beat 6-0. But my teachers were good. I had a math teacher named Orville Linnebrink, who after he left Liberty Center became a mathematician in Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, which was a research type of institute, and he became a mathematician. Don Woody was our biology teacher. We had some nice lady teachers. I remember one. Her name was Joyce Barrick, and she taught Latin. And she would sit up on the corner of her desk with her skirt a little higher than you'd think was proper. And she always wore net stockings, lace stockings. But my teachers were good. They were dedicated people. And they were parts of the community, because in those days it was proper. If you lived or you taught in a school district, you lived there too. So we saw them on the street, we saw them in church, we saw them, we had contact with the people in school. And I think sometimes we lose out on that right now, because teaching has become a job more than a profession. And if you drive over here from Bowling Green, do your day's work and drive back home, you've forgotten about Liberty Center School. One thing that happened during my high school time had to do with the football stadium. When we first played, we played on a field which is now an asphalt parking lot, but it was sand, with sandburrs. And some of the men in the community who had sympathy with the school decided we should have a football stadium. So they bought some land south of the school and developed a football field which is in the same shape and size as the football field is now. And they put up electric lights. And I played on that field the first night that anybody played on it. probably in September of 1940. But my high school days were good. I had about a straight A average, which was both good and bad, because I got my studies so easily that I didn't know how to study. But that resolved itself when I got to college.
Any special hangout places? Did you go to movies? Did you have any girlfriends? Did you get ice cream somewhere?
Yes, I picked up a girlfriend when I was a freshman. Her name was Bonita Grace Bicken. And we dated for 7 years. I guess we called it we were going steady. And we did have fun. We would go to a show in Napoleon, and after the show there were two places, one called Mike's and the other one called, can't think right now, a man named Young ran it. And they served ice cream and chocolate malts. And in Mike's, he even made homemade chocolate candy, dip chocolates. So we would go there. And once in a while, we would go to a dance. Out on Road D towards Delta and west, there was a Grange Hall called Plattston Grange. And we would go there sometimes on Saturday night. Along about that time, our class and our people were learning to dance. So once again, the ladies of the American Legion Auxiliary organized a dance club. And in the upstairs of the old city hall, there was a floor, a dance floor, or a gym floor, or a theater floor, or whatever you want to call it. And they held dances for us. Well, it became hard for us to get music. So some of us who were in high school decided we'd form our own band. So we had Bryce Overmeyer on trumpet, Bob Romaker on trumpet, Bob Myers played saxophone, Aubrey Jennings played clarinet. I played the piano, believe it or not. And we had a boy named Bob Smith, who played the drum. And we were able to contract ourselves out mostly to the CIC boys, CCC boys, Civilian Conservation Corps. And we'd go on Saturday night and play a dance. Well, we needed music. And Glenn Miller had some publications out of his music, which was simply written that we could handle. And so we needed to buy some music. So my dad, Freddie, financed us $300, and we bought music. And before we disbanded, we'd paid him back his $300. So that's what we did for fun. And it was great fun. Once in a while, we'd go swimming. I remember going to Bowling Green. They had a city pool. Napoleon didn't have one. And even sometimes we swam in the Maumee River. But mostly if we went swimming, some of the people around here, Bonnie's folks, and my mom and dad liked to go up to Michigan, to Devil's Lake, or Wampers Lake, and you could swim there. One year, it must have been after it was while I was in school, maybe 1939. Dad took our house trailer up to what they call Manitou Beach, which is on Devil's Lake. And my mom asked Bonnie to go along. So we had a tent. We pitched a tent. She slept in the tent. Bruce slept. But anyway, they had a dance hall there. And they had good bands. And Bonnie and I had a lot of fun. And I think she stayed 2 weeks. So I think we were up there 2 weeks. And of course, we could swim every day because the beach was right there. Now what?
How old were you when you graduated high school?
I was 17. I turned 17 in January and graduated in May. And to finish that story, I started college when I was 17, of course. And after my first year, December 7th had occurred. And the Navy took over Case Institute of Technology. And some of the fellows in my class joined up with the Navy because when they graduated, they would get to be an ensign in the Navy. I didn't. But I found out early on that the Navy doesn't take summer vacations during wartime. So I was able to complete 36 months of schooling in 35 months. And I graduated from college when I was 20 years old.
So you went to Case. Was it a university at that time or no?
No, it was a private school.
Okay. And why did you attend Case?
Well, as you know, the Creagers were in road building, and we had a man named John Snell, who was a state engineer who came out on our jobs, and he had gone to Case. And also he had a son going to Case who was a sophomore. Well, between his son and John, they convinced me I should go to Case.
So what was your major?
My major was chemical engineering with a business second. We had the choice of taking a business, a research, something else. But I took the business courses, which was a good thing because the way my job wound up, I did a lot of bookkeeping.
So when you went into chemical engineering with a minor, if you call it that, in business, do you have the mindset, hey, one day I'm going to be working for Creager Brothers, or what were your career goals at the time?
No, early on I had been contacted through a man that sold asphalt for Standard Oil Company. And he knew about me from the time I was little. And he said, you should apply while you're still in school to Standard Oil Company. So I had a tentative job in that Standard Oil Company. And having had some experience with road construction, I wanted to work in the department that developed asphalt. And I never knew whether I ever would have got that job because I started working at the Creager Company.
Yeah. Where did you live while you were at Case?
Well, Case didn't have dormitories, but they had 13 fraternity houses. And I was assigned to the house of Phi Kappa Tau, T-A-U, Tau. But after I got settled in there, I had to have a place to land. Bud Snell, John Radford Snell, he knew where I was, and he came and moved me over to his house. So I lived in the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity house all the time I was in college.
So do you have 10, a dozen, 15 roommates?
We had about room for 17 people in the house.
Okay.
And we served about 40 at noon because the guys who rode the streetcar to school would come over to the house for lunch. We had a couple that he had been the chef at one of the country clubs. And so we had this couple that lived in a little apartment on the second floor of our house. And he was the cook, and she did some cleaning down in the bottom. Kind of acted like a house mother to us.
Yeah.
So we ate well. He was a good cook. But after the war, after the boys who were in the Navy went to a Navy dorm, we wound up to where we only had about 9 or 10 of us. We couldn't afford to keep the cooks and all. So we closed that down, and we made a deal to eat at the Phi Delta Kappa house, which meant about a 3/4 of a mile walk for us to get there to eat. But I lived in the fraternity house the whole time I was there.
Did you attend or play any sports or in band, chorus? Did you hold...
I played in the band all the years I was at Case. And I went out for track, but I found out that my ability didn't match with the opponents. So I quit. I did play. We had interfraternity competition. Each fraternity would have a team: basketball, wrestling, swimming, baseball, tennis. I played on the tennis team and the baseball team for the fraternity, and I had a lot of fun.
Did you have any jobs while you were in school?
Yes. In my senior year, Bud, John Snell, he had a job with General Electric, working in a control lab, and he got me a job out there. So for about 8 or 9 months I worked. It was a swing shift thing, kind of a flexible. You know, I could work when I could, and I had to ride about 6 miles on the streetcar to get to work. I'd get off at midnight.
Did you ever make it home for holidays? And
Oh,
how
yeah.
did you make it home?
I was home a lot because I had a girlfriend there who went to Bowling Green. And I was home. Yes, I got home. Sometimes I would hitchhike from Cleveland down. And sometimes I'd ride the bus. But I always went back on the train. At 6 o'clock on Sunday night, well, 6 o'clock every night, but on Sunday night I'd get on the train in Toledo at 6 o'clock, and in 90 minutes I was in downtown Toledo, or Cleveland. The scheduled time for that train from Toledo to Cleveland was 90 minutes. And boy, they ran fast.
Did you have any classes that you particularly liked or disliked?
Yes, I liked the chemistry classes. But we had some classes like physical chemistry, organic chemistry, and some of those were hard for me. And while they were interesting, they were hard for me. I liked mechanical drawing. That was a good course. took that for 2 years. You saw some of my drawing. That was a good course.
What was the date when you graduated, and did you attend graduation?
Oh yes, I graduated August the 20th, 1944. And my draft board had been lenient to me and left me finish one semester, maybe a little more, on a deferment from the Army. But the old guy, a man named Baughman, who was the chairman of the draft board in Napoleon, said, "Ralph, we're going to let you finish school, but as soon as you're out of school, you belong to the Army." So I graduated in August of 20th. The 19th of September, I was in the Army. The next draft after my month.
Yeah.
So it worked out good.
So that's when you went right to basic training? That's the next step?
Next, I left Napoleon at 7 o'clock in the morning on the morning train, went to Toledo. They processed us there and shipped us on to Cleveland on the train. And from there we went to Atterbury, Indiana, which is down by Indianapolis. We were there 3 or 4 days and we went to Camp Fannin, which was in Tyler, Texas, for basic training. That was a hazardous time in Europe. We started in our basic training about the 1st of October, and by just before Christmas they canceled our training. And the reason they did was the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944. There was a German breakthrough, and we had people surrounded at a place called, can't tell you now. So that's another story. I didn't have to go. They sent those guys home and flew them into Europe, and they weren't trained even hardly. What the heck's the name of that town?
What was your rank in the military? And did you have a number? Or?
When I went in and all the way through OCS, I was private. And when you finish OCS, you become an officer and a gentleman by an act of Congress. And I became a second lieutenant.
Do you have any buddies that you remember specifically?
No. I had a couple, and they're dead.
Friends from Liberty Center that you knew in the military, did you ever meet up with them and your paths ever cross?
One did. I was in Japan, and I heard from home that Bob Overmeyer was in Japan. And I was able to get in touch with him in Yokohama. And I had access to a Jeep, so I went down and got him, brought him up to our place for a weekend. But that's the only one. There was another man there named Harry Gramling that I had contacted, and we were going to get together, but it never worked out. But those were the only ones.
So what was it like living in Japan? Did you eat Japanese food?
No, we were billeted, and we had our office, our sleeping quarters, our living room, and the kitchen and dining room in a small building that had been the offices for a airplane parts manufacturing company. So, military government, to help the people of Japan, hired different people and paid them to work for us. So we had 4 cooks who took care of the kitchen and KP. We had 3 house girls who did our laundry. We had 2 house boys who just run errands. They were little kids. Or I think the one was 13, the other one might have been 12.
Japanese. Okay.
Oh, we had a mechanic. He wasn't worth the goddamn. I did more mechanic work on the Jeeps than he did. Anyway, we had a gardener. And we had a barber that came to shop.
Oh, my.
All this was paid for out of the reparations after the Army. And those people were so glad to have work, you know.
Yeah.
And so we did have some Japanese food, but mostly it was American food.
So what were your duties and assignments then?
Well, I was considered originally to be a special agent. So we would get assignments down from MacArthur's headquarters of something we were supposed to investigate. So I would go out and look it over, investigate. One of the problems we had was with labor unions. They were determined to take over the companies they worked for. They didn't want to raise or this, they wanted to take over the company. And it got a little hairy sometimes. Not so much on our part, but they used to have some clashes. And later on, then I became the commandant, the head of the department. And so I had reports to write, assignments to make to all these other guys. We had 19 people, was about the most we had there in this one little detachment. And we had all kinds. I had a man who was in charge of our office who had been a sergeant in the Cincinnati police force. And I had one guy who worked as an agent but also a translator. He'd been a professor of Japanese at the University of Michigan. And, we had 2 guys who had been FBI agents. I mean, we were high class. And I was an engineer.
So, you were married at this time, correct?
Yes. I got married when I got out of OCS.
So, did you communicate with Grandma through letters, telephone?
Letters.
Okay.
That was all we had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you find that difficult?
No. No. I married the girl through letters because I went in the Army in September. In March, her mother had brought her down to Atlanta, Georgia, because she had Jean's father's sister lived there. And then they brought her over to Columbus, Georgia, where Fort Benning was. And so I saw her that one time. Well, on the 19th of June, I got my bars and took off on my first airplane flight to Cleveland. I got in there late Tuesday night. Saturday night at 6 o'clock we got married. And all these activities going on at the house, Yeah. Her sister was living there because her husband, Uncle Don, was in the Army. So the 3 women were getting things ready for a wedding. And Jean said her dad was always worried. Are you sure Ralph knows what you guys are doing?
So when were you discharged, the date?
What?
What was the date that you were discharged?
I got home October 1st. 1946.
Okay.
And I didn't get a discharge. I got a certificate of separation. And along about 1951, when Korea was going, they called me back up. They didn't take me in the Army, but I had to go take my physical and everything, because I was still theoretically under their control. And it went along about till 1953. One day I got a letter in the mail, and it was my discharge. I'd been in the Army 9 years.
Okay, yeah.
So strange things happen.
Yeah. So your wife, Margaret Jean Lance, that time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, she was born May 14th, 1925. She went to Cleveland Heights High School, and she went to a girls' division of Western Reserve called Floristone Mather. And she was doing that when I met her.
So you met her in school then?
Yeah. Well, see, Case was all men. Floristone Mather was all women.
I see.
So we kind of got together.
Yeah. Do you remember the day you met her?
Yes, definitely. I don't know the date. I do remember this, and this is strange. We had our first date on June the 10th. And, but when I met her before that, a couple of weeks before, some of her girls got us together it was like a soda fountain in the hotel there and we were all sitting at the table. I was sitting on one side and Jean sat across from me on a big long table. And in the process, somehow or other, I upset a milkshake right in her lap. The very first day I met her. I guess she forgave me.
Yeah, I'm glad she did. Yep. Can you describe your wedding for us?
Well, for one thing, it was very hot. June 23rd, 1945. And Jean wanted to wear the dress that her sister had used. But her sister's wedding was in December, and it was a real heavy satin white dress. Jean about melted. And I'm wearing my full dress uniform, which is wool. We about melted. We were married in St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Cleveland Heights. And they had the reception for people back at Jean's house. And it was nice. But I remember it being so hot.
And you said your honeymoon was spent on a military base in Texas, correct?
Yeah. We went from here down Route 66, through Oklahoma City, to a town named Gainesville. And that outside of Gainesville was a camp named Camp House. I think it was spelled just about like house, or maybe Haus, house. And I wasn't assigned to anything, but they were closing that camp down. So I worked with the ordnance department, marking and cataloging rifles. And we had to put them in a bundle bale with a shipping, what a shipping band is?
Yes. Put
25 in a bale. And a crane would dip them in cosmoline, which is kind of like a wax that was hot. We'd stack them up, 25 more. And I wasn't there too long, and the camp finally did close down. I might have been there 2 months, I'm not sure. And they shipped me to Fort Hood, Camp Hood it was then. So we moved to a little town named Belton, and about 20 miles from camp. And we stayed there until they moved me to Baltimore, Maryland, to counterintelligence corps school. And from there I went to Japan.
Okay. You mentioned before you entered high school, you were working in Xenia, Ohio?
We were living down there. Dad was working.
Okay. So would you say your first job was working on the roads? I know you did a little bit of farming too.
Well, no, I didn't do any farming. That was just a one-day deal.
Oh.
But no, I didn't work on the road. I was only 13 years old.
Okay.
I was out on the road once in a while. Dad would have me flag traffic or something.
Okay.
For a temporary time.
So you consider your first job when you got out of the military then, and then entered the family business?
Yeah.
Okay. What job would you have liked if you hadn't done, road construction? You ever make it that far?
Well, I would like to have worked with Standard Oil in that asphalt thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it never bothered me because it was gone,
Right.
But I think about it once in a while.
Okay. What were your responsibilities with Creager and in S.C. Johnson?
Well, in Creager Company, of course, see, Dad died in 1960. And but even before that, I ran the office, did the bidding on the road, and worked out on the road.
Yeah.
The first 6 or 7 years, I ran a grader and did the bookkeeping at night.
What exactly is a grader?
Well, it's a long tool with wheels in front, tandem wheels behind, and a great big blade in the middle. Planer, you might call it. It's a grader.
Yeah. Okay.
You've seen them.
I know. Yeah, I know what they are. You had a lot of people in town here work for you, correct?
Yes.
Um,
Some people worked for us most of their life.
Yeah. Yep.
Or my dad.
It was a successful company. I'm sure there were some hard times too.
Oh, you could have tough luck on a job. And
Yeah.
it get pretty tight for a while.
So were there any likes and dislikes about being responsible for
No.
the company?
It was a way of life.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
What do you do? I'm a baseball player. What do you do? I build roads.
Yeah. Yep.
That type of thing.
Well, good. The Masonic Lodge.
Yes.
We should probably cover that.
Yes, the Masonic Lodge was always a great part in my life. My great-great-grandfather, Calvin C. Young, who was one of the founders of Liberty Center, was also a charter member of the Liberty Center Masonic Lodge. My grandfather was a member of the lodge, very active. He served as the master in 1928. And so it became, and my stepfather was a Mason. He was raised in 1925. But anyway, it was always understood that when I got old enough, I was going to be a Mason. So when the time came and I got in the Army, and I was a Mason. And I was raised, I think it was April 17th, 1947. And I went through the chairs right away. And in 1951, I became a master for the first time. And then I wasn't master again for another 26 years, till 1975. And then I had 4 times after that. So I was a master six times. And as you know, I enjoyed it.
Still do.
Still do. But it's a good institution, and it was deeply instilled in the Young family. My real father never had the opportunity to be a Mason because he died when he was 22. And my grandfather's father, George Young, he wasn't a Mason either. And I shouldn't say this for publication, but evidently George was kind of a black sheep because you can't find out much about him. What was going on? Maybe a Maverick would be a difference. Yeah. But the Mason's Lodge is good.
So the Young family,
Yeah.
they've been around this area for quite some time?
As far as I know, Daniel Young and his son Calvin C. Young, the first recorded thing I've got of them is 1849. They came from from Scott, New York, and settled right down here. Well, I don't think it covered this town. Up at the Dairy Bar corner, they settled their farm, came up there, and went down to beyond Dutch Mueller's, came back. That farm had 80 acres, but I think that he owned another 40 or 80 acres somewhere else in here. In 1863, he plotted off 12 lots as a subdivision. And they weren't properly recorded, I don't think, till 1865. And it's called C.C. Young's First Addition to Liberty Center. And so they've been here a long time. Liberty Center was originally founded a community where Damascus Bridge is now. And on the canal. Well, the railroad came through 2 miles north, but they didn't put a siding in for Liberty Center. There wasn't enough there to warrant putting siding in. But Calvin C. went to the railroad and told them if they would put a siding in there, he would build a depot and man it for free. So he learned to be a telegrapher, and he, with his other things, he ran the depot too. The depot, the first part of it, sits right down the street here, a little house. So, and I'm not sure, but evidently he was a woodworker or a carpenter or whatever you want to call it. And he built things around Liberty. Ran a store. If the building is still there, it's across from where the depot used to sit. He evidently ran a store in part of that building and lived in the other part when he had the depot across the street. And of course, there's been part of the Young family in Liberty Center ever since that time. Still is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You about done?
Yeah.
I've got it.
So, I guess Ralph Jr. Creager, you've been alive for Well, you just turned 89 this past January. Hopefully you have a couple more at least.
Yes.
You lived a wonderful life. I think you've reached out to pretty much anybody you can. I think you can be real proud of things you've accomplished in your life, and seems like you're a really loving person, very grateful, and I think everybody really appreciates who you are.
Thank you.
Any closing remarks?
I have been blessed. Period. Turn it off.